Well, good morning. I am Robert Kelly. I'm one of the pastors here at the church, and I just wanted to say happy birthday, Beacon. You guys know it is the 5th anniversary of Beacon Church today, right here in this location. Very cool. You guys have, some of you have been here since the very beginning. Some of you, this is your first week here, and it's just a neat time. It was 5 years ago that we opened up for public services here at this location in East Williston. It's kind of interesting because Beacon has sort of a few different birthdays. We have the birthday of when we first really started, before we even went over to the hotel, met over there on Stewart Ave at one of the hotels. We have that birthday, which was sort of our first, public service, which was over at the hotel. And then you could also think of it as a little bit of a birthday when we started at the New Hyde Park campus too, but we don't even know when that was and what that was all about. So, we actually could celebrate a birthday almost every month, but this is sort of a big one for us because this was really a day when we kind of took things to a whole different level and a whole new place, and it was a big start for us, and that was 5 years ago. In our tradition, we do have a little Christmas ornament for you as well. We have this every year, and so on your way out, be sure to pick up your 2010 Happy Birthday Beacon ornament. And so our goal, of course, is to make it enough years that we'll fill a whole tree with these things, and not have to repeat them. But when we started, who knew? I mean, we talk about this regularly. Last night was Christmas Fest. That's how we celebrate our birthday now, by the way. We throw a big party for the community. So we had a great time at Christmas Fest. Oh my goodness, what a crazy night. I don't know, a lot of you were there. I know a lot of you were there because, all of the numbers that we keep counting, not all of them are in, but it was crazy. We lost track of how many volunteers we have. It must be 60, 70. They had 600 finger sandwiches. My wife was telling me last night, I'm like, wait, go back. Did you say 600 finger sandwiches you made? Yeah, they made 600. We had, I don't know, Chris, how many people were in the band? That was out of control. Like the whole stage was just filled. Not even if you count all the kids that came up and participated in the program with us. So what a great night. You guys did an amazing job. You threw a great party for the community. I think we probably end up, once we figure it all out, there's probably 350 or 400 people that came through. We had 2 different shows, 2 sittings, both were full. It was a really great night, and what a great way to celebrate our 5th anniversary. We go through these seasons where we do these big old events, and we have other times where, we kind of dig in deeper and we figure out what, it is that we're doing and who we are and why we do the things that we do. And every now and then I get into this mode of saying, but God, what is it all about? Like, what are we doing? Why? Here we are, plugging away and working hard and trying to do this thing. And, what is our little church really going to be about? And how are we going to make a difference? What do we get? The needs are so great. And how is it that we're going to actually make any sort of an impact? Is this where we hope we would be 5 years in? In some ways, we're beyond anything we would have imagined. In other ways, we're not making nearly the kind of an impact that I hoped we would make. And so what does this even mean, God? You could go through your own life, not only as an organization as we are, and not only as a spiritual family. You could do this individually. You could drive yourself crazy with it. You could say, what am I really doing here for the kingdom? What kind of kingdom impact am I going to make? Have I made? I look back at my life. Does it really matter? Have I done anything that will be remembered? What's my next stage? What's my next step? Is there any that actually matters? What does any of this matter? Where's the result, the fruit? Where are the lives changed, the families, and all of this kind of stuff? We start to ask ourselves these questions. I do this on a regular basis. I do it for us as a church, and I do it as an individual. I think sometimes we start to ask these kinds of questions because we're trying to figure out what our place is. Not only our place, but what it is that God would have for us, and whether or not what we're doing really, in the end, matters. We've been in the midst of this series. I think that for many of us, we look at the Gospel of Mark. It's the shortest of the Gospels. We've been in this series, lead, follow, and get in the way. And we're really studying the book of Mark. And we've been asking, what does it mean to follow Jesus? And I think at the root of that is this question. Not only what does it mean to be a disciple? What does the life of a disciple look like? Is our life Are our kingdom efforts meaningful? Or is it sometimes true that we're just sort of useless in what's happening here? Is my life useless? Are my efforts worthy of note? I don't know. What happened? Maybe they are, and you just don't feel like they are. Maybe today there's a little bit of clarity that I can offer you on that. Maybe they're not. Maybe most of what it is that we are involved in or invested in doesn't really matter much. Then maybe this morning can offer up for you a challenge, though that you might be able to reorient your heart more in line with the heart of a disciple of Jesus. So we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 4. We're going to look at a whole string of parables, starting in verse 21. And we're going to be asking this question: do our kingdom efforts matter? Do our kingdom efforts matter? Starting in verse 21, you can follow along with me as I read. He said to them, "Do you bring in a lamp to put it under a bowl or a bed? Instead, don't you put it on its stand? For whatever is hidden is meant to be disclosed, and whatever is concealed is meant to be brought out into the open. If anyone has ears to hear, let him hear." We are designed to shine. We're designed to shine. You know, it's not a surprise that the name of the church is Beacon. It's not surprising that we took the idea of a lighthouse and built it not only into our logo, but built it into the thought of who we are as a congregation. When we started out, we said this is a spiritually dark area. And in our own hearts, there are all of these areas of darkness not yet given to God's light, not yet surrendered to our God. We want to be a light. We want to shine. We just didn't like the word lighthouse, so we switched it to Beacon. And so we became Beacon Church, a light to shine in a dark place. We were designed to shine. When you're a disciple, your life is meant to shine. You know, I like this idea because, of course, we're really to give light in the midst of our journey. See, wherever it is you are headed, wherever you are going in life, whatever you do day in, day out, wherever you find yourself, you're designed to shine. Do you feel that way about yourself? Do you ever internalize that, what it means to shine each and every moment of the day? To shine a light that isn't even your own light, but to shine a light that is the light from God. You know, we live this life, our Christian lives, often very conservatively. This is a story of the difference between childhood, how we grew up, some of us grew up, and some of you grew up, and how we're raising our kids today. This writer said that when I was a kid, we didn't have padding under our jungle gyms. We had rocks. We didn't have safety belts on our swing sets. The whole goal was to get as high as you could, then launch yourself into the stratosphere. We rode our bikes without helmets, without shoes, sometimes without clothes. We played in creeks, ran through abandoned houses, jumped on trampolines, ran our go-karts straight into oncoming traffic, and we played with BB guns, with half the time spent pumping them up because we heard you could put an eye out. We parachuted out of trees with bed sheets, threw lawn darts at each other, and had no sunblock, so we burned to a crisp. We blew up Barbie dolls with M80s, we ran with scissors, and our Halloween costumes were made of asbestos. But for safety, our moms made us wait an hour after we ate before we went swimming. We live these very cushioned lives today. I can't imagine letting my kids do half of the things that I did. We're child-proofing the world around us. And for some reason, we've taken this idea into the life of the disciple. We are child-proofing our lives, trying to live our Christian experience without risk. Really? We are meant to shine, designed to shine. My goodness, that's a life of great risk, of incredible sacrifice, of getting out there on the edge. That's where we're meant to be, to shine in this dark world. I think for many, there's a sense of embarrassment that we often will have. We'll say, oh my goodness, is this really what it's meant to be about? I'm supposed to tell people this. I'm supposed to live this way. And what are people going to say? What are people going to think? Well, we have this shame that starts to creep in. I don't really want them to know what I really think. I don't really want them to know what I feel about this whole God thing, Jesus thing. If you've got a sense of shame or embarrassment, you haven't yet wrestled with the fullness of this message. You haven't begun to see what it means to be light in a dark place. If people really are stumbling around in a spiritual darkness, in a wasteland, and you are the light of this world, through your life lived for the glory of God, then what shame or embarrassment is that? How can we second guess this call? How can we say, oh, I really don't want people to know. I'm going to cover up my witness. I'm going to cover up my life. So really? People are stumbling around in a wasteland. And you've got the key. There's no shame in that. That is a noble call. There is something great and wonderful and marvelous, and it's a privilege when you begin to let this truth sink in. Take this light, the light that's been put in you, let it shine. What a gift. What a gift. We, I guess everyone, of course, has to find their voice. There's all sorts of ways you can do good in the world. Here, I heard of one guy. He decided that his entire life, his mother told him that, if he cracked his knuckles, he was going to get arthritis. You've heard people they told us this. So what he decided to do was to crack his knuckles his entire life on one hand only, to test, to see if at the end of his life that was true. So 50 years of knuckle cracking on one hand, the jury's in. No arthritis in that hand. So you can go ahead and crack your knuckles as much as you want. This guy found his way to serve this world. Now, it's not a huge way to serve the world, but you know what? He found his voice. Another guy, he received an inheritance from his grandpa, and so what he did was he lost his job at a hotel. He's in St. Paul, Minnesota. He bought an old junkyard bus for $2,000. He fixed it up, and he offers free coffee and sing-alongs, and he goes to the regular bus stops, and he picks people up, and he drives them around to their next stop. Free bus. You imagine that? This is what he does. So some guy tried to pay him and say, hey, I'm always taking your bus. I want to take a free ride. I don't want to be a moocher. He's like, no, my grandpa paid for all this. He left me the inheritance. That's what he does. He just drives around town, picking up strangers, driving them to their next stop with free coffee and sing-alongs. That's a cool, but he found his voice. He found his way. All right, now, I'm hoping we can all do better than this. Knuckle cracking and bus guy. But my goodness, what a way. Think about that. What is your voice? How will you find your way to let your light shine? Everyone's will be a little bit different. Some will be more out there, and others will, be more service-oriented. Others, who knows? But you've got to find a way to let your light shine. The work that Christ is doing in your heart, finding and outworking in this world. I think one of the hints we can get to this is seen in the next couple of verses, starting in take a look at 21 here. 24. He says, consider carefully what you hear, he continued. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you and even more. Whoever has will be given more. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. Starting to get a little twist here, a little turn. There's two storylines here. There's the optimistic and the positive one, and there's also the scary undertone. That's that's starting to creep into the parables. We'll see it again in a moment. See, Beacon here is working to become a tool to amplify your work. That's how we view the work of the church. We're going to amplify your light. We're going to create the tools necessary for you. We're going to offer you the training needed so that your light can shine. It isn't simply the light of Beacon Church that needs to shine. We're creating an environment. This is our goal, is to create an environment where all of us will have our light amplified. And we read something like this and we have to understand a part of this means that we've got to wade into this thing. See, when you become a generous giver of yourself, you'll start to experience what it means to let your light shine. To become a generous giver. Whatever that means, your time, your talent, your treasure, a generous giver, we begin to see the light shine. He tells us here, I mean, you sort of, with the same measure you use, it's going to be measured back to you. You want to be stingy? Then that's what you'll receive. You want to be, now, if you want to begin to experience the fullness of God, then start to wade into God. And as you wade in, as you begin to experience more and more of Him, now you'll begin to feel and experience more of His blessing poured out, more of His generosity poured out on your life, more of His presence. If you don't wade in, He's saying you're not going to experience it. Take a look. He says, whoever has will be given more. That's what He's talking about. If you have this taste, if you have a thirst, if you're beginning to experience it, if you don't want that taste, then you'll end up with nothing. Nothing. Even worse than nothing. You'll see in other parts of the Scriptures. This is the warning. And in a world of takers, how startling to find a group of givers. There was a story I'd come across. It was in Craigslist. It was, actually, I shouldn't say it was in Craigslist. It was one of these Craigslist kinds of stories. Alina Gadke of Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. She found out that her wedding dress had been stolen from a storage facility. What a bummer, right? She found out there's these takers in the world. This is what we hear all these people taken. So what she ended up doing was took matters in her own hands. She started checking Craigslist for the dress and ultimately found it. So the thieves had posted it to sell it on Craigslist. So she worked with the police and posed as a potential buyer and went and identified the dress and got the whole place, all the folks arrested, all the other stuff they had stolen. Yeah, we want to see that, right? Because who likes takers? You don't take stuff. And yet, we condition our lives. We surround ourselves. We experience the taking. We fall into this. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we love Christmas, isn't it? Because it's an opportunity to give. Isn't this why we love gift giving? This is why Santa has some enduring value. This is why, despite whatever, other faults the guy may have, he brings gifts. He's generous. Some kids were writing letters to Santa, and maybe this is helpful for some of you who are going to be giving gifts. One child, John, and he was 4, he said, "I'm sorry, Santa, but we don't have a chimney. I'll leave the cat flap unlocked for you, but please watch out for the litter box." Mackenzie, 11, said, "Did you really run over my grandma?" Bry, at 7, he said, "I'm sorry for putting all that X-Lax in your milk last year. I wasn't sure if you were real. My dad was really mad." David, 8, said, "Do you know Tim Allen?" Now we're mixing worlds all up. I like Roseanne, 11 years old. She said, "Do you know Jesus is the real reason of Christmas? Not to be mean, but he is." Very sweet. We love this idea because there is a part of us, though we are so conditioned by this world to be takers, when we get to experience what it means to be generous givers. Wow, we love that. We love to see the stories around us of people who are generous givers. And if we are stingy, God says that's what we'll get back. When we let our light shine in increasingly generous ways, no matter what it is that you have, you can find how to use that for the kingdom of God. No matter what it is that you have been given, what gift you have, what time, talent, treasure, when you start to give that out, let that light shine, now you'll start to take on the experience of being a generous giver. Your light begins to shine and you get to start to taste it. And God says, when you do that, I'll give you even more. You'll get more of me. You'll experience even more. And if you want none of it, then you will get none of it. That little undertone is going to be developed here. Look at verse 26, because now we start to ask, well, whatever it is that we do offer, will this in the end matter? Look at verse 26. He also said, "This is what the kingdom of God is like. A man scatters seed on the ground night and day. Whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know how. All by itself the soil produces grain. First the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head. As soon as the grain is ripe, he puts the sickle to it, because the harvest has come. Sorry about that. When we see something like this, the story kind of unfolding, this idea of the sickle, I think, is a big part of it. We see the seed start small. We talked a little bit about this last week with the parable. We see the kingdom starts in these small and often unseen and inconspicuous ways. The image added here now is this image of the sickle. Sickle's often an image of judgment, so we've got to kind of keep that in mind. There's an end time coming. There is a day of reckoning that's going to be manifest. He sort of tells a similar way with the parable of the mustard seed without the sickle theme. Verse 30. Again he said, "What shall we say the kingdom of God is like? Or what parable shall we use to describe it? It's like a mustard seed, which is the smallest seed you plant in the ground. Yet when planted, it grows and becomes the largest of all garden plants, with such big branches that the birds of the air can perch in its shade." With many similar parables, Jesus spoke the word to them, as much as they could understand. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. But when he was alone with his own disciples, he explained everything. The idea behind these two is simple. Though very small, these things are not in any way unimportant. Though very small, they are not unimportant. We like things to start great and big and grand. It's just not often the way God works. There's a story of a scientist. He started with grand plans. It was 1856, William Perkin. He was intent on discovering a cure for one of the deadliest diseases in the world, malaria. It's a pretty big goal. It's nice and noble. He's going to start big, make a big splash. But while he was trying to sort of create this malaria fighter, he instead accidentally created mauve. And that is where he now turned his attention. And he released the color mauve on the world. Wow. How anticlimactic. Can you imagine having set out to cure malaria and end with mauve? We still regret this. What a horrible accident. What a cruel twist of fate. I wish he would have stuck with the malaria thing. But now we have mauve. I'm sorry if any of you have mauve. I'm looking around. I'm hoping I'm not, I see a few little hints of mauve. Can you imagine this? For some reason, things that often want to start big don't really necessarily end big. They often end a lot smaller than they did. God's saying the kingdom starts differently. It's going to start small, like a seed, unseen, and grow, and become something big, something meaningful, something significant, something you couldn't have understood. He uses this idea of the mustard seed, the tiny little seed, the nice big bush, the shrubby tree, where the birds can rest. Throughout the scriptures, you'll find, especially in the prophetic literature, you'll find this idea of the birds resting in the shade of the tree. It talks about this sense of peace, this comfort, this protection that takes place. So now, because this seed has grown, some birds have found the hope that they needed, the rest that they needed, the shade, the protection from the elements that they needed. One of my all-time favorite stories, I tell it time and again, and it has always just for some reason fascinated me. It's the story of the young man who's walking down the seashore. I've told a number of you this before. He's walking down the seashore after a big storm, and there's all sorts of starfish that are now washed up on shore. All of these starfish just washed up, hundreds. And of course, if they stay washed up on shore, they're going to die. They're not supposed to be on shore. They're supposed to be in the water. They're going to die. And as he's kind of walking down, he's picking up these starfish and he's whipping them back into the water, just throwing them back in, one after another, after another, after another. And an older man is standing there and he says, "What are you doing? There are hundreds of starfish right here. Just in a mile of beach, maybe thousands. And there's thousands of miles of coastline. There's a countless number of starfish that are all going to die. What good are you doing by throwing those starfish in?" The young man bends down, he picks up a starfish, he looks at it, and he whips it into the ocean, and he says, "Well, it made a difference to that one. Made a difference to that one. What good are you really doing? Your efforts are so small, so meaningless." Well, it made a difference to that one. Made a difference to that one. you take the Bible story and you even think through, even some of the passages that we have been reading. And if in fact this idea of the sickle is true, that there is a day of reckoning coming for all of humanity, that one day the harvest will be brought in, that God's judgment will in fact fall on all of humanity, well, then it makes a difference for that one. Whatever efforts we lay out can make a difference. It would have been very easy to overlook some shepherds in the field. They're just shepherds. It's just a few shepherds. There's thousands of shepherds just in Israel. Never mind all of the thousands of shepherds. Why not? What about other? Why shepherds? What? Just one poor couple in Nazareth. What's the big deal? Just a couple of people. What do they matter? Really. Whether it's a few fishermen or a tax collector or a thief, what do they really matter? There's countless people. What does it really matter? Who really cares? God does. Can you say that? Who really cares? God does. God does. Who really cares? God does. Why do we forget this so readily? Because God does, so will I. So will I. Luke 15, one of my absolute favorite verses. In the same way I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Somehow, in God's economy, when one person comes to an understanding of the love of God for them and the sacrifice of Jesus, when one becomes a disciple, a follower of Jesus, one out of all of the countless billions who have walked on this earth, when one, God erupts with joy. It's not the angel, it's the presence of the angels. God erupts with joy when one comes to faith. One. Who cares? God does. And if God does, so will I. What does it matter? What do my small efforts mean? Though small, they are not unimportant. It matters to that one. And it might be that elderly lady that lives across the street. It might be that odd dude that works in the cubicle near you. It might be the barista who keeps getting your drink order wrong at Starbucks. There's an endless variety of people. These are who cares about a few birds who find shade in this tree? Well, what if that bird was someone that you cared about? What if that one bird was one of your family members, or one of your children, or one of your aging parents? Who cares? My goodness. It all hinges on these small and not unimportant advances. Exceedingly important, erupting joy in the presence of the angels. Now, when we begin to read all of these stories, especially in Mark, it's helpful when you're reading the scriptures to remember that they're structured in such a way as to tell a story. These aren't just chronological stories. Often they're not chronological. The writers have put things together in different ways in order to explain a deeper, more important theological point than they would if they were spread out differently or even told in a certain order. The next parable passage, starting in verse 35, is Mark's signature way of helping us understand the parables that went before it. He's now explaining a little bit more. Verse 35 in chapter 4, he tells this very, very famous story about the calming of the storm. He says, "That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with them. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drown?' He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, 'Quiet, be still.' Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to the disciples, 'Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?' They were terrified and asked each other, 'Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him.' Now, usually we talk about this passage, we say this is God calming the storms in your life. The storms erupt, God calms them. He has power to calm the storms, so trust Him in the midst of the turbulent storms. But if you were to take this in the context of what has just gone on, all of these stories of the small beginnings and the great end result, now you begin to get the source of your power for what you've been called to. You see, the Jews weren't a seafaring people. We look at the ocean, we like it, we think, oh, it's so pretty, we love to go visit it. Except for a few fishermen on the Sea of Galilee, if you talk to the ancient Jews about the ocean, about the great sea, about the water, they think in terms of the chaos of creation. They think in terms of Jonah. They have all these stories of Jonah being swallowed by the whale in the midst of the storm. I mean, that was their background to these kinds of stories. You see, this is the conquering of chaos. This is the reordering of creation for them. This isn't just Him calming a storm and keeping His disciples safe and settling the turbulence in your life. This is much bigger than that. This is the God of all power. This is the one who is the conqueror of the chaos of creation, bringing His power, His might to bear. And He's calling us. This conquering Jesus is calling us to shine. I think for many of us at this point, we might even say, you know what? I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to do what I can. Is that really the sort of pathetic way of the world that we want to follow? To do what we can? Really? When have you been called to do what you can? My goodness. We serve the risen King, the conqueror of the chaos, the giver of life. Don't do what you can. Do beyond what you can. Go deep. Do you still have so little faith? That's what He tells the disciples. Do you still have so little faith? Don't do what you can. Through you, do what Jesus can. Let His power flow through your life, enabling your generosity, making your light shine brighter, more powerfully in this world. Listening to that still small voice as you look out into this world for lives that need to be touched by you. Go beyond, far beyond what it is you think you can do, turning your faith, your trust toward this awesome and powerful God. This is the story, this is the Christmas story. People doing far more than they ever could through the power of God working in their lives. May this mark all of the years to come for us as a community of faith and for each one of us as individual followers of Jesus. Would you pray with me? Lord, You have given us as a spiritual family so many gifts. Time and again, You have honored us in ways that we could never have hoped or imagined. Lord, through our often feeble offerings, You have brought people to a saving knowledge of their King. You have caused lives to be transformed, marriages to be renewed, lives rebuilt. You have helped us through trial and struggle and tribulation, and You have given so many of us a hope and purpose beyond what we could have foreseen. Lord, sometimes we get to get a little bit hard or down on ourselves as we look and wonder what it is, Lord, that we're really doing. Will it matter? Are we making a difference? And yet all of heaven erupts with joy when a single person decides to turn from their selfish ways to follow You as Lord and Savior. We ask, Lord, that You would instill deep in us this desire to shine Your light in a dark world in ways made possible only by the power of the Spirit working in our lives. Make us those kinds of vessels that are effective and powerful. Make us the kind of people that live generously in every way, beyond our capabilities as we learn to trust fully and completely in you, as we tap into your strength. We ask, Lord, that we would be increasingly known as a community of faith sold out to you, disciples, followers, who have no other gods before us. We ask in Christ's name all these things. Amen.